In the stifling atmosphere of Fairmont Crest, where every road is lined with opulence and power, Vernon always emerges as a symbol of control and success. He holds too many connections, orchestrating a series of events behind closed doors, to the point where any upheaval in the community inevitably ties back to his crafty, calculating hands. Yet, beneath his calm exterior, the deep-set gaze of Vernon betrays cracks visible only to those truly patient enough to notice. Every time his family faces misfortune, he is unable to resist the urge to seek outside help, as if he instinctively knows that the secrets he buries could be uncovered at any moment. This is why Bill frequently appears in Vernon's orbit, someone capable of doing the things Vernon would prefer not to dirty his own hands with, tasks that require decisiveness and coldness to erase any trace. And this time, when the troubles surrounding Dana and Leslie escalate, Vernon considers entrusting Bill with the cleaning task, a familiar solution to maintain control. But before the plan can be set into motion, another shadow intervenes, disrupting the fragile equilibrium: Peaches. Peach's arrival is not merely that of a troublemaker. Each of her steps carries the scent of secrecy and destruction, as if the past, hidden within the lavish walls of the Dupree estate, is slowly being unearthed, layer by layer. The name Barbara Mitchell begins to echo again, tied to the dark memories that Vernon has spent his life burying, and Leslie, who once thought she was just a small cog in the family, is suddenly pulled into the whirlpool of truth. Peaches, with her cunning, lets every word she speaks cut into Anita's fragile trust, turning her already unstable life into utter chaos. But Peaches is not done yet. Her next target is Vernon, the one she believes holds a truth powerful enough to bring down the entire empire of power he has built. The most tense moment comes when Peaches bluntly forces Vernon to confront the past, asserting that he is Leslie's father. That accusation fills the air with a suffocating tension. Vernon, with his face still trying to maintain composure, can no longer hide the trembling hands that grip tightly. The whispers in the community, the unconfirmed rumors, are now placed before him like an inescapable verdict. Peaches, with a gaze both cold and proud, seems to know too much, or at least pretends to know everything, forcing Vernon into a corner with no way out. In order to protect what he has, he begins to consider extreme solutions, even the use of weapons, a choice not just for self-defense but to ensure that the truth will never escape. However, is Vernon truly ready to touch the brink of tragedy? Or will he once again choose to use others to do the dirty work for him? Bill remains there, like a loyal but risky shadow, as that loyalty could flip if trust crumbles. And while Vernon vacillates between action and retreat, Peaches still stands there, mysterious, unpredictable, as if every word she speaks is a carefully calculated move. Who truly holds the power? Does Peaches really know all of Vernon's secrets, or is she merely pushing him into the trap of his own fear? That question hangs in the air, leaving only a heavy premonition: tragedy could erupt at any moment, and the price to be paid will not stop with just one person. Vernon walked down the dark hallway, where the light from the crystal chandeliers only served to highlight the cold edges of the mansion. In that moment, he felt as though the walls were closing in, tightening around him, the very body that had always craved control of everything. For a long time, he had been accustomed to pulling the strings in secret, making people move according to his will. But never before had an outsider made him waver like this. Peaches didn't just appear as a name, she was a crack spreading through the foundation of the family, signaling the collapse Vernon had tried to avoid for years. He wondered, how much did she really know, or was she just testing with hypotheses to probe the tremors in his eyes? The way she threw Barbara Mitchell's name into the mix felt like a curse, something he had buried with the past, now resurfacing as a ghost. Barbara was no longer alive, but the memory of her lingered like a nightmare Vernon couldn't wake from. Peach's involvement of Leslie in this whirlwind made everything even more dangerous, for Leslie, fragile as she was, carried within her the unfulfilled thirst to uncover her true roots. When Peaches whispered in Leslie's ear that Vernon might be her father, it was like adding fuel to a fire of suspicion, and Vernon knew if that fire ignited, nothing could extinguish it. Meanwhile, Anita seemed to be spiraling further into chaos. This woman, who had already endured so much turmoil, was now cornered by rumors and unhealed emotional wounds. Peaches knew exactly where to strike, and Anita was one of the weakest links. As trust between husband and wife deepened into a cavernous rift, Vernon found himself more isolated than ever. He understood that if he let everything slip beyond his grasp, not only his reputation, but the entire power he had built would collapse in a chain reaction. In his mind, scenarios played out one after another: either extinguish the threat named Peaches, or find a way to break her will with cold, controlled dominance. But both paths were soaked in blood and fraught with danger. Bill was the next name that arose in Vernon's calculations. He had been an effective tool, a shadow that could disappear once the task was done, leaving behind a deadly silence as though nothing had ever happened. But Vernon knew well, Bill's loyalty was not born of affection, but from a delicate balance of benefit and fear. If that balance ever shifted, Bill could easily become a blade that turned against its master. Yet, Vernon had little choice at this point. He began to consider giving Bill the task with Peaches, but deep down, he hesitated, knowing that if he failed, Peaches would become a far more dangerous enemy than ever, and all the secrets about Leslie, Barbara, and even himself would be laid bare. While these covert maneuvers twisted in his mind, Peaches remained composed, confident like a cat playing with its prey. She wasn't in a hurry to expose everything she knew, instead letting out bits of information slowly, pushing Vernon into a pit of doubt. Did she really know the truth about Leslie's father, or was she weaving a story to force him into revealing a crack in his facade? That question kept Vernon up many nights, each night repeating the same nightmare where Barbara's figure returned, along with the wrong choices of his youth that he thought were buried beneath the dust of time. And then, that tension no longer stayed within his thoughts. One evening, as the darkness enveloped the vast garden behind the mansion, Vernon and Peaches faced each other in the windswept courtyard. Her cold, challenging words cut deep into his mind, forcing him to confront what he had never dared to speak, that the truth about Leslie might indeed suggest he was her father. In that moment, Vernon's breath grew heavy, his eyes flashing with a mix of anger and confusion, and his hand reached for the cold metal hidden in his coat pocket, as if a dark survival instinct was rising within him. Peaches saw this, but instead of retreating, she advanced, her gaze defiant, as if she wanted to push him to the very edge of his limits. The question now was no longer how much Peaches knew, but how far Vernon was willing to go to protect what he wanted to hide. He could choose to eliminate her, bury everything in eternal silence, or he could face the truth, let the past be exposed, and accept losing it all. No matter the choice, the consequences could not be avoided, for the game had already begun, and no one could return to the starting point. After the stormy confrontation, Vernon realized that Peaches' presence was no longer a mere nuisance, but a direct threat to the survival of both his family and the empire of power he had built. Every moment of hesitation meant allowing her to draw closer to the truth, and each rumor sown was like a knife slowly cutting through the veil that protected his past. Vernon knew that Peaches was different from the enemies he had faced before. She wasn't after money, nor was she thirsty for power. What she wanted seemed to transcend ordinary calculations, and it was this unpredictability that forced him into making an extreme decision. That night, in the dimly lit room illuminated only by the desk lamp, Vernon sat before Bill, his hand heavy on the wooden table, his eyes cold with resolve. He no longer spoke in circles or hinted at things, he issued a direct order. Bill was to find a way to take Peaches out of the game, not merely threaten her, but kidnap her, imprison her, to cut off the chain of fear she had been spreading throughout the Dupree house. The plan unfolded faster than Vernon had anticipated. Within days, Peaches vanished from her usual haunts, leaving behind an eerie silence that stirred whispers in the community. But while people outside speculated that she had laid low due to a scandal or personal scheming, she was, in fact, being held captive in an abandoned house on the outskirts of the city, her hands bound, and the room barely lit by a faint, flickering light. The damp smell, the cold of the brick walls, and the sound of the wind howling through the cracks made the air thick like an invisible trap. Vernon didn't appear immediately, he let Bill and his men stand guard. But when the time was right, he entered the room, carrying with him an aura of both power and menace. His gaze was fixed on Peaches, no longer the pretense of calmness but an expression of pent-up fury. He spoke little, but each word was like a hammer blow, declaring that she had crossed a line, that she had entered a forbidden territory no one was allowed to trespass. Vernon made it clear. If Peaches didn't remain silent, if she dared to utter another word about Barbara or Leslie, the consequences would not stop in that room. Despite being imprisoned, Peaches still held her head high, her eyes blazing with defiance. She remained silent, but the faint smile on her lips only made Vernon's patience wear thinner. It was not the smile of the defeated, but of someone who believed she held something that made her untouchable. Vernon realized that even bound, Peaches still wielded power, not in her physical form, but in the secrets she kept hidden. He suspected that Peaches had left a clue somewhere, a piece of evidence, a message, or a witness who knew everything. That was why she showed no fear. In the damp room, Vernon didn't just issue threats, he painted a dark vision. Leslie would never learn the truth if Peaches continued to play dangerous games, Anita would never escape the nightmare if the rumors spread, and Peaches' life would be the price for her stubbornness. He gritted his teeth, mentioning how those who had once dared to oppose him were now forgotten names, as if they had never existed at all. The room echoed with Vernon's voice, not in shouts, but in a cold, steady tone, carving deeper into the listener's mind than any gunshot or blade ever could. Yet Peaches did not cry, did not beg. Her silence at that moment bewildered Vernon, as though he were facing a mirror, where the fear he had concealed for so long was slowly being revealed. He could hire people to kidnap her, he could bind her body, but could he ever bind the truth? That question remained unanswered.